The metallic clang of plasma chains echoed off the reinforced walls of cell Z99. Saloon felt the weight of those chains as a constant reminder of his confinement. Yet he made no complaints. He merely tilted his head back, gazing at the blue force field that kept him trapped. He had learned to live in that cell, to count the days like one counts the beats of a clock ticking in the void. 2,190 days, he murmured to himself, as if time on Helios held a meaning beyond mere waiting.
Around him, the Helios space station, nicknamed the Gateway to Heaven by the prisoners, floated in the deep void, far from any known planet, in a region riddled with strange and unfamiliar constellations. Helios was a maximum security fortress, a place where freedom was a distant echo of the past for the condemned. Security guards, half human and half machine, patrolled with mechanical precision, each step marking an oppressive monotony that seemed endless. For most prisoners, time there was an eternal punishment, but for Sekun, it was part of something greater. Any casual observer would see just another prisoner in cell Z99. But Saun was not just any inmate. He was a former Special Forces operative, convicted of crimes he knew he had not committed. Day after day, he spent his time observing, analyzing, and waiting, without revealing to anyone the thirst for freedom that kept him awake at night. His body was trained to endure pain, but his mind was sharp, ready for the slightest opportunity to escape. The bluish reflection of the force field on his skin made him appear like a specter, a ghost trapped in an impenetrable prison. Yet, even in his confinement, Seyun found solace in what he observed. His hearing, enhanced by combat implants, picked up the faintest changes. Today, something felt different. The guard's footsteps had changed rhythm, a pattern he had memorized after thousands of nights. Someone was here, and that someone was not just anyone. The blue light of the force field intensified for a moment before dimming. Just a flicker. Only those truly paying attention would have noticed that slight decrease in intensity. For Sehun, it was like a shout. It meant only one thing. The station's power supply had been temporarily diverted, reducing the security field's strength. Someone important was on board. Through the ventilation grate, he heard the robotic voice of the Calcom, the station's public address system. All prisoners must position themselves against the walls of their cells. Royal inspection in progress. The news spread like an electric shock through the cell blocks. Prisoners exchanged looks of surprise, some of fear. Princess Terra, the Emperor's daughter, had arrived for her annual inspection. It was a carefully orchestrated event to show the Empire that its machinery of justice was under control. Tara, with her regal bearing and otherworldly beauty, was the jewel of the galactic crown. But for Safon, she was something more, the key to his freedom. This is the moment, Safon thought as he straightened up, feeling his muscles tense. He had been waiting years for this opportunity. During those endless nights, he had devised a plan, observing the energy flow, tracking every movement, and learning every security protocol of Helios. Tara's arrival was the only instance when the station's security was relaxed. Son was not alone in the cell. He shared his confinement with Gra, a Martian with purple skin and scars who, despite his intimidating appearance, had a sour sense of humor that helped endure the endless hours. Gra turned to him, his eyes gleaming with mischief. "You heard that, pretty boy? The princess is here. I bet that gets your heart racing, huh?" he said with a cynical grin. Sakun did not reply. His gaze was fixed on the force field. His eyes studied the nuances of the humming energy, barely perceptible. He knew that in less than 5 minutes, the field would weaken enough for his small device to work. "Just another day in paradise," he finally responded, trying to downplay it, though inside, his mind was a whirlwind. Sullen's calm was as taut as a bowstring ready to snap. With an almost imperceptible movement, he slid his hand to the back of his neck, where a small hidden patch provided him protection. Against the odds, it required a patience that only a man with his training could possess. Now, with Terra's arrival, his opportunity was within reach. The footsteps began to resonate closer. From his cell, Sarun saw the royal entourage entering the prisoner block. Princess Terra moved with hypnotic grace, each movement calculated and precise. Dressed in a silver suit that reflected light as if she were wrapped in an aura of stars. She had pale blue skin and hair cascading in iridescent waves, a striking contrast against Helios's grim environment. Her presence was not just a display of beauty, it was a reminder of a power that only she possessed at that moment. "That's me," San thought as the guards passed by him. "Very." The approving murmur of Wen, a half-mechanical man with a cybernetic eye, made the guards stop. "Your Highness, these prisoners are among the most dangerous," Wen explained, his mechanical eye scanning every inch of the cells. Terra's gaze landed on San's cell. Her eyes, an indescribable color, like miniature nebulas, traced his figure. San stood up, ignoring the burn of the neuro-implants. That is prisoner 88,173, known as San," Wen continued with disdain. "He was a special forces operative, convicted of a series of crimes he insists he did not commit." Saloon let out a dry, calculated laugh. "Crimes. Crimes I didn't commit," his voice interjected defiantly. "If you would listen to me, Your Highness, I could show you that there are two sides to this story." The princess held her gaze steady, her lips barely curving, a hint of amusement. "Really?" Terra asked, a playful glimmer in her eyes. Sound lifted his chin, determined not to look away. "Hearing the truth has never harmed anyone, or are you afraid of discovering something uncomfortable, Your Highness?" The guards tensed, their weapons aimed directly at him, ready to fire at the slightest sign of threat. But Saloon did not flinch for an instant. Suddenly, the lights in the cell flickered. That was the signal he had been waiting for years. The device he had assembled over months began emitting an imperceptible signal, generating a slight interference in the plasma field that held him captive. Without wasting a second, Sapfoon tensed his muscles and, in a precise movement, freed himself from his restraints. The force field weakened just enough, allowing him a split second of advantage to pass through it. His years of training and precision in each of his movements enabled him to subdue two guards before anyone could react. The block erupted into chaos. With the skill of someone who had spent years perfecting a single movement, Sound navigated through the confusion, dodging guards until, suddenly, his arms wrapped around Terra's waist. The pressure at her side was gentle yet firm. The princess did not even attempt to scream, and a bold smile formed on her lips. "Looks like you had it all planned, prisoner," she whispered, her words wrapped in a tone of surprise and amusement. Saloon couldn't help but return her smile as he calmly led her toward the emergency capsules, where he would take the next step of his intricate plan. The adventure was just beginning, and although the station remained on high alert, Saloon felt that for the first time in a long while, freedom was within his grasp. The emergency capsule was narrow, and barely had space for two people. The red warning lights blinked like a grim reminder, but Sapon saw only one thing: Princess Terra, his ticket out, and the only one with the power to change his fate. As the guards regrouped on the other side of the armored door, he pressed the closure button and let the hiss of the pressurized system seal his determination. Samhain kept his eyes fixed on Terra, who watched him with a mix of interest and challenge. She had not resisted, nor had she tried to struggle. Her face remained impassive, and somehow, that told him much more than any cry for help. This princess was shrewd, more than he had anticipated. Perhaps, after all, this plan would not be as straightforward as he had imagined during those long nights of waiting. So, princess? No questions?" he asked, with a smile that barely concealed the adrenaline still coursing through his body. Now, Terra looked him up and down, assessing him with eyes so deep they seemed like miniature galaxies. "I've had hostages before," she replied calmly. "It's a cliché too predictable, don't you think?" Sen narrowed his eyes, sensing something hidden in her tone, as if the situation intrigued her more than it frightened her. Nevertheless, he decided to maintain control of the conversation. He knew any hesitation could cost him control. "Sometimes clichés work, Your Highness," he said, moving close enough for her to feel the weight of his gaze, "especially when it comes to rewriting a story that the Empire has distorted." Terra raised an amused eyebrow. "And what story is that?" she asked, her tone challenging yet calm. Sound felt the words building in his throat, almost burning him as he recalled the reason for his conviction. He could not explain the details without revealing his vulnerability. But he also could not allow the princess to think he was merely a criminal escaping justice. "The truth behind Nexus Prime," he replied, weighing each word carefully. For the first time, Terra's expression changed. Her gaze became inquisitive,
and for a brief instant, Sawun detected something resembling understanding and even interest. She knew the name. The Nexus Prime incident had been one of the Empire's greatest cover-ups, and while no one knew the full truth, the few pieces of the puzzle that had leaked were dark enough to cause an uproar throughout the galaxy. The Empire had chalked it all up to a technical error, with insufficient evidence. They had locked Sakun away as a scapegoat. "I see, Nexus Prime," Tara murmured, as if weighing the implications of those words. But before she could say anything more, a series of subtle explosions shook the capsule, and the alarm system emitted a shrill beep. The sensors began to flash, indicating that the station had initiated the deployment of pursuit ships.
Sakun knew time was running out now. If they didn't leave soon, they would be trapped in a swarm of interceptors that would return them to Helios faster than one could blink.
"Ready for a bit of turbulence, Princess?" he asked, a hint of arrogance in his voice, as he activated the capsule's engines. "Do what you must, prisoner." Tara's voice was cold, and her eyes challenged him to take control of the situation. Sawun smiled and pulled the controls, launching the capsule into the starry void. The Helios station shrank rapidly behind them, and the stars seemed to blur as the capsule's energy field entered evasion mode. The first shots from the interceptors passed dangerously close, and the sensors began lighting up with alarms. With his military training, Sakun maneuvered with precision, calculating the necessary movements to stay out of the tracking missile's range. Beside him, Tara watched in silence, showing no fear.
Even in a situation like this, her presence was overwhelming. The princess was not just a royal figure. She was someone who, against all odds, seemed to understand what he was doing. For a few seconds, Sawun's curiosity grew, although it was not the right moment to interrogate her. A violent jolt shook the capsule, sending sparks flying and forcing Sawun to grip with both hands. "The shield system is at its limit," Tara informed, observing the readings with an almost unreal calm. Sawun leaned toward the emergency controls, activating the secondary thrusters, feeling the heat of adrenaline coursing through his veins. However, in that moment of tension, he felt something strange. The pendant Tara wore around her neck began to emit a faint, almost hypnotic glow. Sakun noticed how the princess's eyes looked at him with intensity, as if that gesture were more intentional than it appeared. This could help you get out of here," she said, holding the pendant and extending it with a serene expression. He looked at it skeptically, but the situation left him no choice. With no time to question, he took the pendant and put it on. As soon as the object touched his skin, a wave of information flowed into his mind. His perception sharpened, his reflexes seemed to accelerate, and somehow, his spatial awareness intensified, allowing him to visualize trajectories and movement patterns in space. Sakun could barely process what was happening, but the effects were undeniable. In seconds, information flowed in his mind with clarity. The trajectories of the pursuing ships appeared on the cockpit glass, indicating blind spots and maneuvers he could execute to evade them. Without hesitation, he executed a tight turn, dodging the missiles that followed while the capsule zigzagged. Sawun's thoughts returned to Tara. This princess was not the decorative figure he had imagined, nor was she a helpless woman. There was something about her, something calculating, a sharp mind that seemed willing to collaborate in a mission he still did not fully understand. Then he asked, "Why are you helping me?" feeling the capsule accelerate thanks to the new maneuvers his mind could now process. Tara watched him silently for a few seconds, as if assessing how far she could trust him. "I've been investigating what happened at Nexus Prime for some time," she finally replied, turned blind. Her tone was a whisper that barely broke the noise of the capsule. "I knew the reports were altered, but I could never access the complete information and sense. And then you appeared, the only man who might have seen the truth." Sawun felt a pang in his chest, as if that name, Nexus Prime, were a wound that had yet to heal. What she said gave him a reason to believe, to trust, even if just for a moment. Tara continued speaking, her words wrapped in a mix of anger and determination. "The Empire has built its greatness on secrets and betrayals. If you want justice, and I want it too, then our paths are already intertwined." Sawun nodded, feeling that although their goals were still not entirely clear, their motivations echoed in Tara's voice. She was offering him not just a means to escape, but a promise of redemption, a glimmer of hope. The capsule reached the edge of the station's gravitational field, and in a final effort, Sehun activated the jump thrusters. The capsule shuddered, and then, in a flash of light, they vanished from Helios's sight and the pursuing interceptors. When the jump concluded, a tranquil, dark space enveloped them.
They were alone in the vastness of the galaxy. But Sehun knew this was just the beginning. Uncertainty and tension filled the capsule. But something else crept into the atmosphere. Terra and Sehun exchanged glances. Two beings caught in a game of power and revenge, united by secrets that forced them to depend on one another. "This is just a small victory," San said, breaking the silence, "but it will be enough for now." Terra nodded, her gaze laden with an implicit promise, one that Salin still did not fully comprehend. "Then let's survive together, prisoner," she whispered.
Terra's words reminded Salin that the challenge was only beginning.
He could not fully trust her, but he felt that they both shared a desire, a hunger for truth and justice, that would make them face whatever lay ahead. The capsule drifted in space, out of sight of the Helios station. The tension settled in the air, palpable and intense. Sehun and Terra remained silent, but their gazes held questions neither seemed ready to answer. The small space of the capsule felt suffocating, but something in the calm that followed their escape allowed emotions to emerge without filters or barriers.
Sound held the pendant in his hand, the one Terra had given him minutes earlier. He studied it with curiosity, as if it were a piece of a puzzle he was just beginning to decipher. The object radiated a faint warmth, an energy he had never felt before, and somehow it awakened in him a new, almost supernatural ability. He remembered how, upon putting on the pendant, his senses had intensified, allowing him to execute maneuvers that would have been impossible under other circumstances. The pendant was more than just an accessory. It was cutting-edge technology, a tool of royalty, Terra observed as he examined it, and seemed to decide that it was time to speak. "That pendant you have," she began, her voice soft yet laden with intent. "Now, it's something few people in the Empire possess. It grants you access to advanced perception skills and other abilities you will discover over time." San looked up, surprised. The princess did not seem like a queen. She appeared calm, even defiant, as if she were in control of every aspect of the situation. Perhaps she was. The truth was that Terra had been unusually willing to cooperate, and that stirred in Sasson a mix of wariness and admiration. "Why would you give me something so valuable?" he asked, not taking his eyes off her. "You could have tried to escape. You could have screamed. Why take the risk?" She held his gaze, and for a few seconds silence was the only answer. Finally, Terra sighed and looked away toward the void stretching through the capsule's window. The galaxy seemed infinite, and at that moment her expression reflected a weight greater than that of a simple princess. "Because this is bigger than you, or much bigger than any of us could imagine." Her voice was soft, but each word resonated like a solemn declaration. "Since what happened at Nexus Prime, I've been searching for answers, and you are the key to understanding what really happened." Sehun did not respond immediately. Now, Nexus Prime, the name was like a dark echo in his memory, an event that had marked him, but whose wound had yet to heal. He remembered the screams, the betrayal, the feeling of being used as a disposable tool. The Empire had covered up the truth and condemned him to bury the scandal. "What do you know about Nexus Prime?" he finally asked, determined to find out how much he could trust her. Terra turned her face toward him, and in her eyes he saw a spark of contained anger. "I know the Empire turned it into a massacre," she replied firmly. "I know they silenced the evidence, manipulated the facts, and used you as a scapegoat. The Council decided that the best way to avoid controversy was to hide what happened and sacrifice you." Sehun clenched his fists, trying to control the rage bubbling within him. It was not just the pain of betrayal, but the indignation of knowing the Empire toyed with him, as if he were mere pieces on their board. "But why do you care so much?" he asked, searching for a genuine reason in her words. "You're the princess. You could have ignored it. Let the Empire continue hiding the truth." Terra looked directly at him, with an intensity that made him think her calm facade was crumbling. For the first time, he sensed something human in the princess. Not just a diplomatic interest or a royal duty, but a personal need. "Because the Empire used me too," she replied quietly, though her voice was heavy with pain.
I've spent years uncovering how the Council manipulates everything to their advantage, from the fates of systems to the future of our own people. The Nexus Prime incident was the last straw. I discovered secret documents that, if revealed, could change the fate of the galaxy.
Sacum slowly began to grasp the magnitude of what they had in common. They had both been betrayed, used as pawns by a system that had no qualms about eliminating anyone who posed a threat. "And what is your plan, Princess?" he asked with a wry smile.
"Do you want to overthrow the Empire?" Terra let out a brief laugh, devoid of humor, as if the idea were more real than he could imagine. "Perhaps it's not so far-fetched," San replied without a trace of irony. "Perhaps it's not so far-fetched." At that moment the capsule's system emitted a beep, pulling them from their exchange of glances. The navigation device had found a jump route to an outer system, but it also detected signals from nearby ships. They were the Imperial trackers, the response to the escape that had disrupted the entire Helios station. Sagun frowned, knowing time was running out. "We need to get out of here," he said, activating the jump thrusters while checking the capsule's stability.
The interceptors would not be long in catching up with them.
Tara looked at the navigation console and then turned her gaze back to him.
"There's a nearby planet, Terrace. If we can get there, we might find refuge. Its inhabitants have avoided Imperial intervention, and their culture is deeply rooted in combat. They could help us if we earn their respect." Saloon raised an eyebrow, intrigued by the idea.
"So your plan is that we try to ally ourselves with legendary warriors who hate outsiders?" he asked with a crooked smile. "Sounds risky, but I guess that makes it perfect." "That's what we need right now," Terra replied, returning his smile, a defiant glimmer in her eyes. "Besides, if you plan to overthrow the Empire, you'll need more than a pendant and a dream of revenge."
The capsule entered the gravitational field of Terrace, and Sakun prepared for atmospheric entry. His hands moved with precision over the controls, calculating each maneuver with the pendant, which continued to emit information in his mind, as if it were an extension of his own consciousness. The idea of descending into an unknown and dangerous world filled him with an excitement he had not felt in years. When the capsule touched down with a light impact, Sayun and Terra exchanged a glance. They were in this together, though not by choice, but because they both had scores to settle with the Empire. And they both knew they needed a trustworthy ally. Sayun extended a hand toward her, offering a show of solidarity. "Let's join forces, Princess. If we want to survive here and uncover the truth, we'll need to trust one another." Terra looked at his outstretched hand, and for a moment Samun thought she would refuse. But finally, the princess took his hand with a slight squeeze that confirmed their alliance. This is not just a convenience alliance," Terra said seriously.
"This is something that will change the fate of the galaxy. If you want to move forward, you must know there's no turning back." Salin felt a determination growing within him that he had never experienced before. He was not just escaping Helios. He was entering a war that would define the future of thousands of worlds. And alongside him was Princess Terra, who was also more than she appeared, willing to risk everything for the truth. They both stepped out of the capsule, ready to face the warriors of Terrace, the Imperial trackers, and any challenge the Empire might throw at them. They knew they were embarking on a path of no return. But with each step, the conviction in their alliance strengthened. In that moment, without exchanging words, Terra and Samun understood that the pact they had just forged was not merely an act of survival, but the first step towards something much deeper. The redemption and justice they both craved. The vast forests of Terra stretched before them, dense and filled with a strange beauty. As Salun advanced, the sound of their footsteps was barely a whisper, as if nature itself was silently watching them. They had spent hours exploring, searching for signs of the legendary warriors of Timaris. But so far the landscape seemed unchanged, a green enigma that revealed no secrets. Salin silently analyzed every tree, every shadow, every vibration in the ground. The enhancements the pendant had granted him since he put it on in the capsule seemed to have significantly heightened his perception and reflexes. He felt his mind clearer, his senses sharper than ever, and his body reacting with a precision that surprised even him. However, there was something more. A strange feeling of connection that allowed him to perceive even Terra's subtle thoughts. The princess maintained her impassive demeanor, but Saloon could notice the slight movement of her eyes, the concentration with which she studied the surroundings.
Her gestures and the way her fingers sometimes brushed the pendant hanging from her neck felt like they shared a silent bond, a tacit agreement to stay united without uttering a single word about it. Suddenly, a rustle among the leaves warned them they were not alone. The vibration in the ground changed, and Saloon stopped dead, raising a hand for Tara to do the same. With a gesture, he indicated a direction among the trees, where shadows seemed to move in a way too organized to be just the wind's effect.
"They're here,"
Sound whispered, not taking his eyes off the shadows.
Tara nodded, her eyes reflecting an emotion between challenge and anticipation. They knew that if they had reached them, then they were close to the warriors' territory. A second later, several figures emerged from the underbrush, moving with calculated precision, blocking their path. They were tall, with bluish skin, and an imposing presence. Their bodies adorned with tribal tattoos and dark plate armor that covered their torsos and legs, leaving their arms free to maneuver their plasma spears with lethal precision. One of them, the leader of the group, stepped closer, her gaze fixed on Sakon. "Yara is as sharp as her spear. Outsiders have invaded the sacred ground of Terras. Give me a reason not to execute you here and now," said the warrior, her voice as hard as steel.
Someone stepped forward, raising his hands in a sign of respect.
"We come seeking help," he said, in a clear, determined tone. "We have a common enemy, and we know you wish to protect your independence from the Empire." The warrior frowned, and for a second, a flicker of doubt crossed her expression. However, she did not lower her spear. "And why would a princess of the Empire come to us seeking help?" she asked, looking at Tara with barely concealed disdain. "Outsiders only bring destruction. We have seen how they destroy worlds and corrupt their lands with their technology."
Tara stepped forward, her gaze fierce.
"I am not just any princess," she replied firmly. "My family has done terrible things, and I am here to amend those mistakes. I want to free my people from the Empire's oppression. And I know that with your help, we can do it together. I am willing to face whatever challenges you throw at me, and prove that our intentions are sincere."
The warrior regarded Tara with a skeptical expression.
The atmosphere grew tense, and Salwin knew that at any moment, the situation could turn violent. It was then that an idea crossed his mind. If they wanted to win these warriors' trust, they would have to prove their worth in a way that they respected. "If you don't trust our words, then let us prove it in the field of battle," Suan said, looking directly at the warrior leader. "Let us face your best fighters, and if we survive, then we deserve a chance."
The leader of the warriors smiled, a smile that radiated both respect and a hint of amusement. Her eyes sparkled with a glimmer of approval at Sound's audacity.
"I accept your challenge, outsider. If you survive, you will be welcomed in our lands as allies," the leader said, raising a hand to indicate an improvised combat arena among the trees. "But if you fail, your bodies will remain here, forgotten by time."
Sound nodded and looked at Tara, who was also ready for the challenge. They both knew this would be a crucial point in their mission, not only to gain the warriors' trust, but to prove themselves in a hostile environment. In a few minutes, they found themselves in the center of a combat formation, surrounded by warriors watching with anticipation. The leader had sent two of her best fighters, one with a plasma spear and another with two short swords, spinning them with lethal precision. Salwun felt the pendant heightening his perception, and his mind filled with information about the warriors' movements, their stances, and possible weak points. He knew he must not let his guard down, but the pendant seemed to anticipate every move, showing him routes for attack and defense, as if he had trained in these techniques his entire life. The fight began. The warrior with the short swords advanced toward him with impressive speed, her weapons gleaming with deadly intent. Sound dodged the first attack, pivoting to the side and launching a quick strike that destabilized her. Beside him, Tara fought with a skill that demonstrated she was not just a decorative princess. Her movements were precise and elegant, blocking and countering every attack from the other warrior. As they fought, Sagun could feel how the pendant not only granted him the ability to foresee his opponent's movements, but a deep connection with the environment. The sensation was intoxicating. Every strike, every maneuver felt like a precise dance he led with absolute confidence. Finally, after a rapid exchange of moves, Sagun managed to take down his opponent,
immobilizing the warrior with the short swords. Next to him, Terra had disarmed her opponent and was forcing her to surrender. The leader of the warriors watched the scene, impressed and somehow pleased. Their display of skill and strength had earned them the respect they sought. "You have proven yourselves worthy, outsiders," the leader said, lowering her spear as a sign of respect. "Come, you have much to learn about our culture, and we have much to learn about you."
The tension in the air dissipated as the warriors led them to a hidden camp deep in the forest.
There, among campfires and tents, they gathered for an improvised council. The leader, who introduced herself as Lyra, sat before them and observed them with a mix of curiosity and respect.
"Tell me, what are you really seeking here, in Terrace?"
Lyra asked. "We know the Empire does not hesitate to attack anyone who defies its authority."
Saugun and Terra exchanged a glance, and then he spoke.
"We seek justice and freedom for all the worlds the Empire has oppressed, and we want the help of Terrace. We know your people have resisted the Empire's influence for generations. We want to learn from you, and in return, we offer our loyalty and our fight against a common enemy."
Lyra nodded slowly, her eyes shining with the intensity of someone who understands the weight of what is at stake.
Then, she turned to Terra, watching her with a mix of challenge and acceptance. "If you are willing to fight for this cause, then you are welcome here. But you must know there is no turning back. Your name will no longer be that of a princess, but of a warrior. Betrayal is paid for with blood in our lands."
Terra bowed her head, accepting the condition.
"I have renounced my title the moment I decided to confront the Empire," she replied firmly. "I will remain true to your cause, to our cause." Lyra nodded, and a murmur of approval rose among the present warriors. Tara's acceptance as an ally was not just a triumph. It was a first step toward a path filled with challenges they would have to face together. As night fell, Sashun and Tara joined the vigil of the warriors around the fire, listening to stories of battles, of challenges overcome, and of the history of Terrace, a place that had never bowed to the Empire's power. Among the flames and shadows, Sakun felt he had finally found a purpose amidst his struggle. It was not just his quest that drove him. It was the union with those who, like him, had decided not to yield to the yoke of oppression. As the stars shone in the Terrace sky, he knew that the alliance he had forged with Terra and the warriors was just the beginning of something much greater. The dawn on Terrace arrived cloaked in a crimson hue, a natural warning of what was to come. In the plain where the warrior camp had risen, the warriors of Terrace and Sahun prepared to face the Empire's forces. News of the Imperial fleet approaching had unsettled everyone. But Lyra, the leader of the warriors, kept her troops calm.
Sound and Terra exchanged a brief glance before heading toward the center of the camp. The preparation for battle was palpable, and every warrior was ready, weapons in hand, awaiting the moment to defend their land and freedom. Lyra walked toward them, her spear in hand and her intense gaze fixed on the horizon, where the Empire's ships would soon appear.
"This will be our day of glory," Lyra declared, her tone lifting the spirits of all her warriors. "If we must die, we will die defending our land. But if we survive, then our example will resonate across all worlds under Imperial oppression."
Terra, the princess now turned warrior, nodded beside Lyra. Her gaze that once symbolized authority now reflected deep conviction. She had ceased to be merely a noble, and had joined the cause of Terrace as one among them. Terra no longer represented a noble family, nor the weight of a corrupt empire. She was now a symbol of struggle and hope. "There is no turning back for me, nor for you. Today we fight for the freedom of all worlds. The era of the Empire must end here, and we are the ones who must take the first step," Terra said, and her words were met with a roar of approval from the warriors. Sawun, at her side, felt the weight of the pendant on his chest. That artifact the princess had given him now connected him deeply with the battlefield. Thanks to that technology, he perceived details in the environment that would have previously gone unnoticed. Every move of the warriors, every adjustment of their weapons, and every breath before the first strike felt like a symphony of resistance that the pendant magnified in his mind. Then, the first Imperial ship crossed the sky. A heavy bomber launched a barrage of fire over the plains. The warriors dispersed with agility in a single coordinated movement, counterattacking,
launching plasma projectiles and energy arrows that struck the ship, causing its hull to spark under the sunlight. It was only the beginning, but Salmoon could already feel the weight of the battle about to be fought. There was no turning back. The sound of gunfire, the cries of the warriors, and the echo of the Imperial ship's engines filled the air. The battle erupted in an explosion of force and strategy. The warriors fought with lethal precision, striking and dodging. Their movements were as precise as a predator in full hunt. Terra, with her opposing figure, moved among them, leading, guiding, and protecting her own like a true warrior. Sagoon advanced toward the front lines, facing the Imperial soldiers descending from the ships. With the help of the pendant, his reflexes seemed to anticipate every enemy movement. He dodged attacks and delivered precise blows, taking down one after another. Every second was a blend of adrenaline and absolute concentration. Sagoon's strength seemed unstoppable, and the warriors looked at him with awe and respect as they saw him fight like one of their own, despite being an outsider. Terra, for her part, fought alongside him in perfect synchronization, turning them into a lethal combination. But then, a prominent figure descended from the Empire's flagship. The Supreme Commander, clad in dark, shining armor. The commander was an imposing figure, someone who seemed ready to put an end to this resistance. Upon seeing Sagoon, he smiled with contempt. "Prisoner 88,173, the commander murmured in a deep voice that cut through the battle noise. "Did you really think you could escape? That an insignificant traitor could stand against the Empire?" Sagoon felt his anger rise upon hearing those words, but he did not respond. Instead, he launched into the attack with a force fueled by years of betrayal, by pain, and by a desire for revenge. The combat was brutal, a dance of strength and skill that pushed the limits of human endurance. The commander, with years of training and the backing of state-of-the-art armor, seemed almost unbeatable. But Sound had something he did not possess: conviction. Every blow he threw was filled with that need for justice. Every dodge was a response to the years he had spent as a prisoner, wrongfully accused of crimes he had not committed. In the end, it was that conviction that gave him the advantage. In a calculated move, Sagoon managed to evade the commander's deadly attack and countered, piercing through the armor with a force that brought him down. The commander fell to the ground, defeated, and the flagship began to retreat as the Imperial soldiers abandoned the battle upon seeing their leader defeated. The Empire's withdrawal was swift and definitive. The fields of Tiferus filled with the victory cries of the warriors who watched the enemy retreat, humiliated and without glory. The battle was over, and they, along with Terra and Sanan, had earned the freedom of their land. The price they paid had been high, but their struggle had demonstrated something greater. The resilience of a united people could defeat the most feared empire in the galaxy. Exhausted but satisfied, Sagoon reunited with Tara and Lyra. The leader of the warriors looked at him with a smile of deep respect. "You have given us freedom, outsider," Lyra said firmly. "The warriors of Terras will never forget this day, nor what you sacrificed for our cause." Sagoon felt, looking at Terra, who was smiling, that he had fulfilled his mission, that he had found in this place a purpose that went beyond his revenge. Here, he had fought alongside women who defended their land with honor and strength, and he had seen Terra transform into someone willing to confront her own family, the Empire itself, for a higher ideal. With victory secured, they began discussing the next steps. The warriors of Terras and their allies began to lay the foundations of an alliance that, over time, could challenge the Empire in every corner of the galaxy. The war was far from over, but in this corner of the galaxy, the resistance had begun, and its message would resonate in many other worlds. As night fell, while the warriors celebrated their victory around campfires, Samon and Terra stepped away from the bustle to gaze at the horizon. The peace in the landscape now felt almost unreal. They had liberated Teleris and begun something much larger than they had initially planned. "What we achieved here is just the first step, you know that, right?" Terra said, breaking the silence, her gaze fixed on the stars. "I know, but for the first time in years, I feel like we are fighting for something real, something worth it." Sagoon smiled, feeling a peace he had not experienced in a long time. They shared a moment of silence, a silence filled with determination and hope. They knew the challenges were not over, but they were ready to face them together. The pendant on Sagoon's chest, a symbol of the betrayal and oppression the Empire had imposed, had now become a sign of freedom, a reminder of the power of uniting to challenge tyrants. The last light of day faded on the horizon, and Terra, with a gentle smile, extended her hand toward Selen. He took it, accepting the pact they had sealed with their blood and efforts on the battlefield. Their alliance was not just a temporary union. It was a promise to fight for justice, to defend freedom across all worlds, and to not stop until the Empire fell. Thus, under the starry sky of Terras, the two warriors stood in silence, contemplating the future and the cause that would unite them in the impending struggle. They had won the first battle, but in their hearts they knew that true change was just beginning.